Good evening. This is the hearing on fiscal year 2015's water rate proposal to the New York City Water Board. My name is Matthew Mahoney, and I'll be the hearing officer for this meeting. Just a bit about how we'll work here tonight. First, I'd like to note that we placed certain documents into the official record that pertain to the public notices listing these hearings. The notice designating the hearing officer, the draft of the proposed water board, water and wastewater rate schedule, the public information booklet regarding water and wastewater rates, a copy of which was available downstairs, and they are marked exhibits 1 through 4. After I introduce the members of the water board with us here tonight, we'll hear a presentation from DP's Commissioner, Emily Lloyd, on the water rate proposal, and then we'll open up to the floor to hear from the public. If you did not yet signed up to speak at the front when you entered, please take the time to do so during the presentation. There are sign-up sheets at the front table when you walked in. And as always, anyone may submit written testimony from today up until the close of business, 5 p.m., on May the 20th to the New York City Water Board. Those statements will be entered into the record and copies distributed to the members prior to any votes. I'd like to introduce to you tonight the members of the dais here with us: Adam Freed, Jonathan Golden, Arlene Shaw, and Alfonso Carney. Also joining us is Stephen Lawrence, Executive Director of the New York City Water Board, and Matthieu McLean, the Treasurer. Board Member Carney, would you have anything to add before we begin?
Thanks very much, Matt. Can you all hear me? Yes.
It's for their transcript.
Can you hear me now? So sorry. I'm Alfonso Carney. I'm standing in tonight for the Water Board Chair, Alan Moss, who truly regrets that he could not be here tonight. He wanted me to say a few things to open the meeting. The most important is that we want to thank you all for coming out. You are here to hear this presentation. You've got a lot of options, things you could have been doing tonight, and quite frankly, it's great that you've come out to listen, to hear us, and to offer your comments to us. Please know that this board remains open-minded about the proposal. We know what it is, but we are here to listen to your comments so that we can form our own views about what we're going to do at the rate of proposal vote. So share your thoughts with us. Take some time to make sure that we're clear on what's on your minds. That's most important. There are two people here that I'd like to introduce you to. The first is Commissioner Emily Lloyd, who is the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, and she's right there. The second person is Stephen Lawrence. Stephen is the Executive Director of the Water Board and will be fielding many of the questions that come in tonight. This is the first of 5 borough hearings. We will meet tomorrow and Friday and early next week. And then later we will meet to vote on the proposal. As you know, the Water Board members, we are 7 in number, authorized to be 7 in number. We are not up to that number at this point. We're waiting to see what happens in the next few weeks. We are appointed by the mayor. We are not paid. These are not paid positions. We do this voluntarily. We are committed to serving the people of the city of New York. That's why we're here. Welcome your comments and look forward to hearing them.
Thank you very much, Al. The Water Board would now like to welcome Emily Lloyd, Commissioner of the City's Department of Environmental Protection, to give a presentation. Commissioner?
That's on. Now I have to learn how to work this. Bear with me a minute, please. I can do that. All right. Okay. My technical skills are. I think you can hear me, right? You can hear me. Okay. All right, so we hope that this will be interesting and informative. We tried to lay out some information and it serves not only to, we hope, help anyone who's not familiar with it understand how we arrive at a proposed rate. And we also use it as a sort of annual report because we go out once a year and meet in every borough, so it's a chance for us to report a little bit on what the money's being spent on. So the first slide shows you what the proposed rate is. The rate this year that we are proposing for fiscal year 15 is 3.35%. It's the lowest rate that we've proposed in 9 years. And if you look at the average annual single-family home charge, that is the typical charge that we always try to look at to track it across years and to track it across different cities. So that will go up $33 next year if this proposed rate is adopted. So when we were doing the rate this time last year, and for purposes of talking to the potential bond buyers, they asked us to project what we think the rate will be in following years. And looking out, we thought that the increase would be 7.8%. And so we were able to bring that down to the 3.35%. And these are some of the reasons why we were able to. First of all, the new administration decided to return an additional 10% of the rental payment, and I'll describe that in a little more detail in a minute, to the system this year, so that's $22 million. We did have strong revenues this year. We're about $159 million ahead of plan. These numbers sound very large, but it's a very large system. And this is significantly because we're coming close to completing the installation of automated meter reading, where we are able to collect data about water being used, and homeowners and building owners are able to see how that water is being used on a day-to-day basis, which means that we don't have estimated readings anymore and they are much more accurate. We also have benefited this year from low interest rates. So the cost of borrowing has been about $153 million lower than we had projected that it would be. And we have also been able to negotiate with our regulators, EPA and Department of Environmental Conservation primarily, to do some things that have saved us some capital money, in particular stressing green infrastructure, which holds and detains stormwater, rather than gray infrastructure, which puts it into pipes and tanks and then has to pump it out, which is very expensive and also uses a lot of energy, creates greenhouse gases. So we're trying always to make a strong case for green infrastructure. And then we have been taking a hard look at some of our operations and have been able to achieve some savings, about $34 million, particularly in the areas of chemical use and reductions in energy use. We always, everyone, including we, would love if we got up and announced there wasn't going to be any increase this year. So when we have an increase, which has been the case for quite a while, we like to put it in perspective, because we do work hard to try to keep the increase as small as possible. We like to put it in the perspective of the cost of doing business in a very expensive city, and compare it to the typical unavoidable costs most residents of New York City have to pay, which is their rent or the cost of their mortgage, electricity, gas, many cable service, and that we are able to keep our costs just barely above the national average. And so expensive a city, we hope, helps make our case that we are working hard to keep the rates down. And again, if you compare us to, I think this is 30 cities across the country, we were right in the middle. We were just a tiny bit above the national average, which doesn't matter if you live in New York City, you still got the increase, but we think it does show that we're working hard to keep the costs moderate. And then also, although again, other cities don't matter so much if you're paying your rate in New York City, we do like to make sure people are aware that a lot of these costs are associated with mandates, things we have had to build and ways we have to operate because of the Clean Water Act or the Safe Drinking Water Act, Newtown Creek. was a $5 billion project because of requirements of the Clean Water Act. And all cities across the country have been going through that, and you can sort of, if you watch them roll through the years, you can see their rates jump every now and then. And for example, if you watch California over the next few years with the drought there and the need they are going to have to build desalination plants, we'll see a jump there. So we like to try to measure ourselves against those cities to see how we're doing again and keeping the cost down, and we're right in the middle of where the rate increases have been over the past 15 years. We also try, even while we're trying to keep the cost down, to be trying to improve customer service. In one area where we felt we were really not very strong up until a few years ago was our customer service bureau. And a lot of that revolved around the fact that we had to get into people's homes to read the meter. We had long stretches when people would have estimated bills. The meters were very old, and over time meters started to run slower and slower, so the bills weren't very accurate, and that created a lot of disputes, and I have to say hard feelings between ourselves and customers. And also when they got on the phone to ask us something, they couldn't do it online, and the conversations often we weren't able to be very clear because we didn't know what was happening on a day-to-day basis. So the installation of automated meter reading has been, I think, a tremendous gain in public service. There was discomfort early on as we put in new meters, and some of those meters ran faster than the old meters, so people saw their bills go up, or if they had very long-term estimated bills, those estimates might have been low, so there was certainly some pain as we made the transition. But now that is almost completely installed, we've had an 80% reduction in estimated bills. 5 years ago, we were estimating almost 18% of the bills, and this year it was only 3.5% citywide, and we've had a 49% reduction in billing disputes over the past 3 years, and I think that's a tremendous gain in terms of having ourselves and the customers working off of the same information. We think people trust the information now because it's much more accurate, and if someone feels that their bill is high, they can go right in and look on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it's a leak. Sometimes when they look, they say, "Oh, right, that was the weekend my kids came and brought their 4 kids, and they did laundry all weekend." Sometimes it's as simple as that. I've actually had that experience myself, and so I think it's really very helpful. We also have 240,000 of our customers and more every day who have enrolled in the leak notification program. So if we see a spike in their use, we let them know. They don't have to be checking. We'll let them know something's going on. You better look at it and see what's going on, and that will save them money because they will fix whatever it is. And we also have offered now a service line protection program, which we negotiated with a carrier that will ensure the water line and the sewer line. One of the really sad things in the life of a building owner is when they have a failed service line going, because the homeowner or building owner is responsible for the line going from the street to their house. Most of them are very old in New York City. They fail out of the blue. It's either the sewer line collapses or the water line starts leaking, and they can be very expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars to replace, especially depending how long there's been a leak. And so having insurance to cover that, we think, is a big help for customers. On the operations side, we've also seen, and I can brag about this because I just returned to DEP, I get no credit for this, but I think it's very impressive that over the past year, through, again, looking at a lot of our operations very closely, we've made some tremendous improvements in responding to problems. Leak complaint resolution is 9.5% faster just over this year over this time last year. The time to restore water after a water main break, and that's, of course, it's fine to find the water main break, but when do people get their water back is the big question, particularly if there's a business or a school. That is 7% faster just over the past year. Sewer backup complaints are down by 30%. Catch basin complaints are down by 30%. all of this is about looking at the data more systematically and assigning the resources where they're most needed. So we think we've made real progress there. We've also been part of the citywide planning for climate change. DEP was really the first agency in the city over a decade ago to really start looking at climate change and trying to apply it to our slice of the globe to figure out how it was going to affect our facilities. And we were able to include some very strong initiatives in the big study that was done last year, A Stronger, More Resilient New York. And we, again, are really emphasizing using green rather than gray infrastructure, really figuring out how to reuse our own energy with cogen plants at some of our wastewater treatment plants that generate methane. And we have also looked at some major green infrastructure and protective measures with our facilities that we think we can implement for about $300 million. That would cost us over $1 billion if they were damaged and we had to go back and repair them. And we are also in the process of developing a wastewater facility design, because it's our wastewater facilities right on the edge of the water that are most vulnerable, to a design for those that will become our standard design and that we will start implementing as soon as we have it, doing the designs and trying to upgrade the plants. In the coming year and a couple years, we will be closing out 3 major projects or completing them. First of all, the Catskill, Delaware ultraviolet light disinfection facility. That's a facility that treats about 90% of our water. It's the second form of disinfection, which was required by federal law, and that is now up and running. City Tunnel number 3, the biggest project that nobody's ever heard of because it's underground and nobody sees it, is the second section got activated in October of 2013. This will allow us, when the next leg is activated, to take tunnel number 1, which has been in continuous operation since 1917, to be taken offline, to be inspected and repaired. We know it's leaking, we know it's got problems, and then eventually we'll also be able to rotate 2 off the line. Then we'll have 3 water lines that will give us the ability to take 1 off and repair it. We feel it's very perilous not to be able to supply water to the city if we have a problem with one of the 2 water lines. And of course, Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant, which is now being completed and offers really state-of-the-art treatment, as well as harvesting some of the methane and putting it into distribution with National Grid, and also running a pilot that's taking organic food waste from sanitation and turning that into energy as well. The Croton filtration plant has been a huge undertaking, again required by federal law. There are two plants, and just to give a sense of how big they are, why it was so expensive, I think it is, I have some notes here, it is as much concrete as could, 4 times as much concrete as it took to build the Empire State Building, 29% more steel than it took to build the Chrysler Building, and enough wire to stretch from here to Santa Fe. When it comes online, it will be able to process 290 million gallons. This will be absolutely critical because we are in the process of repairing the Delaware Aqueduct. That will have to come online, offline in 2021, and this is the only way we'll have enough water to supply the city, and we hope to have it up and operating completely in 2015. What we call Water for the Future, which is really a whole series of improvements geared around repairing the Delaware Aqueduct. The Delaware Aqueduct was built in the 40s, and the last pieces of it came online, I think, in the late 80s. It has been leaking for at least 20 years and has taken a very long time to figure out how we could fix it, because it supplies 50% of the water, and we, for years and years, could not figure out how to take 50% of the water to the city offline and to keep the city open. But we've now figured that out, and we are building a bypass. The construction of the first shaft is underway. The actual design of the bypass is underway. There's also a plan to increase the capacity of the Catskill Aqueduct, which is the sister aqueduct for west of Hudson Water, so that we will be able to use more of that during the shutdown. And we have a very aggressive conservation program that we will be rolling out in the city and in some of the upstate communities that use that use New York City water before it becomes New York City water, so that we will be able to have enough water during the shutdown. Just to mention a couple of projects here in Brooklyn, the 26th Ward primary settling tanks. Again, this is to come in compliance with regulations. We are reconstructing the primary settling tanks to improve the actual treatment of the wastewater so it's cleaner when it goes into Jamaica Bay, and to increase wet weather flow management. That's an increasing focus as we get bigger, more frequent storms, is how much of the stormwater can we handle, and what do we do with it when the plant isn't big enough to process it all through. Coney Island also is about to go through major work to expand the storm and sanitary sewers in that area. We have some significant operations changes going into effect in 2015. We have 81 initiatives. This is a piece of work that's been going on for about 3 years. That will save money. About $12 million will be saved from staffing optimization. That's about how you assign the shifts to get the most coverage when you need it and not have coverage when you don't need it. That's both here in the city and upstate. About $11 million from renegotiating chemical contracts and making adjustments to how we dose, getting the dosing down to the minimum that we can do and meet the standards, rather than throwing in some extra to be safe, being a little more scientific about it. The wastewater treatment process has been looked at, and in particular, we're looking at how we can dewater the effluent more, thicken the sludge, and that reduces both the cost of taking the sludge out of the plant and also reduces energy consumption. And then there are other improvements as well. On the other hand, we have about $20 million in increases due to the project I just described. $13 million for water for the future conservation initiatives, such as projects putting low-flow toilets in public schools is an example, and about $5 million in increased real estate taxes. We pay taxes on our facilities upstate, and they are assessed. Although we attempt to negotiate, they are pretty much assessed, and we're told what they are, and they increased 3% this year. We find this very interesting, and hope you will, looking at our capital projects. We talk a lot about the big projects from 2002 to 2013. You can see that about $15.5 billion of our big capital projects were mandated. Those were very difficult to do because it was a very hot construction period, and we were actually competing against ourselves, running the construction costs up in that period of time, but they had to be done because we were legally required to do them. But most of them are being completed now. But this has now allowed us to lower the amount that's going to be spent on mandated projects, and that's very important to us because it's enabling us to take some of this money and put it into other projects that are not mandated, or I should say not yet mandated. They might be at some point in the future, like building out storm sewers in areas that don't have them is one, and doing more green infrastructure. And so we will be able to replacing very old water and sewer lines in some of the older parts of the city. We will be able to do more of that work and really play catch up. You've probably been hearing a lot lately about the aging infrastructure under the streets in the city. This will allow us to put more into that because we've caught up a little bit on some of the other pieces of the infrastructure. This slide again just shows how much the rate is driven by the amount of debt. When we started selling bonds that were for the water system early on, they were about maybe $500 million a year. As mandates has gone up and as the system has aged and we've had to put more money into it, that borrowing has increased. So the amount of debt service we have to pay goes up every year and will continue accumulating for some time to come. With the population of the city growing, among other things, the assumption is that the investment in that will come back to us in water quality and come back, and some of it be offset by additional ratepayers. carrying some of the burden of paying for it. But you can see here, the spending actually lags the commitment time. When we start a big project, the way the city works is we commit that entire project, what we think it's going to cost. We put that money aside, and that's that black bar, that commitment. And then as we start actually paying the contractors to build the project, we actually spend the money. So it's like we take it and put it in the bank, and that's called the commitment. And then we pay out parts of it as we get the work done, and that's the actual expenditure. So you can see that here you get those big commitments in 2007, 2008, but the expenditures then keep going up even as the commitments come down. So you'll see in 2014 and 16 that we're still catching up on some of those commitments. All right, focusing in now on 2015 and what the financial outlook is for 2015, I'll point out again that debt service now is about 45%. So again, that is the single biggest driver of what the rate is. And if you look at what the financial outlook is in terms of what we will have to spend, that's that number in the upper right-hand corner. Including debt service, we project that it will cost us $3,596 million to run the water system in the coming fiscal year. If you go down then the 2015 column, the second from the left, you'll see a lot of what the contributing pieces are, and then you'll see that number again, $3,596. And that is what we think we will have to pay. And then we add in what is a set-aside, a cash-on-hand set-aside. The very minimum amount that is recommended for a big utility is about 15%, which would be about almost $540 million. But we set aside a little more. This is about 23%. I would like us to set aside 25% because of climate change. When something comes like Sandy, and we have to, with emergency contracts, go out and get all of most of our wastewater treatment plants restarted again. Or if we had, like we had a few years ago up in the watershed, a dam that we were suddenly concerned might not withstand a megastorm, we have to have the money in hand, hire the contractor, get that work out there on an emergency basis. And this being a big water system, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So I would like us to have 25%. We have about 23%. If we don't spend it, if the crisis doesn't come, it gets rolled over and helps pay the next year's expenses. So it doesn't go away anywhere, and I'll show you that on the next page. So that brings us to that $4,414 million that we need to fund for fiscal year 15. Okay, now, you go back, look at the top of the page, 2015, $4,414. That's the number, that's the amount of money we need to raise. All right, we have some other things that will help us pay for that. Last year, we had $696 million set aside for emergencies, and we didn't have to spend, we had more, but we didn't have to spend $596. So that we can put towards the $4,400 million. Then we will have other income this year, for example, the rates from upstate. We charge people who use our money upstate for that, who use our water upstate for that water. That will be about $200 million. So after you deduct that from the $4,400,000,000, we will still need to raise from revenue about $3,512,000,000. So then, do we need to raise the water rate? Go down to the next box below. This year's revenues were $3,475,000,000. That's right below the blue 2015. But we won't raise, if we kept the rate the same, we wouldn't raise $3,475,000,000 because every year, because of water conservation, low flow toilets and other things like that, people are using less water, even as the population grows. This is a very good thing that they're using less water, but it means we get less revenue from that water being used. So if we kept the rate the same this year, use goes down, we would only raise this year $3,398,000,000, and that's not enough to fund $3,512,000,000 you see right below that. What's the difference? $114 million. That's what we need to raise. In order to raise that, we need to raise the rate. 3.35%. So that's just sort of how we do the arithmetic that gets us to the rate that we asked to have approved. All right, now some other aspects about the water system. We pay New York City a rental fee for using the water system. Most cities pay the city, their host city, most water utilities pay their host city something, and we're sort of right in the middle of what they pay. Sometimes it's a fee for services. There are all kinds of different ways it's structured. For us, it's the rental payment, which is set at 15% of the annual debt service. On an agreement to cap that about 3 years ago, we've been getting some back the past couple of years, and this year that amount we get back will be $14 million. In addition, the new administration said they wanted to start returning the rental payment to the water system, and they've committed to return an additional 10% of the rental payment this year. So that's an additional $22 million, which brings us to a return, a refund on the rental payment of $36 million, which we think is going in the right direction, definitely. There's some new programs we're introducing this year. One of these is called the Home Water Assistance Program. This is going to work like the Federal Home Energy Assistance Program, and we will do it with the same agency, which was the New York City Human Resources Administration, using exactly the same criteria. People, building owners, homeowners, who in 1 to 4, let me see, 1 to 4 family homes, right? In 1 to 4 family homes will be eligible for a credit against their water bill, just as they're eligible for a credit against their heating bill. And they will be using the exact same criteria for that. And then it will be debited to their bill from the city of New York. These customers, there are about 18,000 customers who will qualify. 75% of them are in single-family homes, and about 61% of them, this is based on the heap numbers, about 61% are over 60 years old. So we think this is a program that will be very helpful to some of the people who have the most difficult time paying. We are also expanding what we call the leak forgiveness program. Heretofore, we did not cover toilets and faucets. That was because people could see them, they could hear them. We thought if you can see your faucet, you can get it fixed. There's no reason why you can't figure out that something's running and get it fixed. However, if it persists in being something that causes a lot of pain and suffering on the part of homeowners, they don't notice. It may be an older couple whose kids have moved out, there's a bathroom they never use anymore, there's a running toilet, and all of a sudden they realize they've gotten a big bill that they weren't expecting. So we are going to now expand the leak forgiveness program to include the toilets and the faucets that weren't included, and with the caveat that people have to come in and get it fixed quickly. And this will in turn encourage them to get that fixed, which is a good water conservation measure. And we think it will reduce a lot of complaints that we now get and problems with billing. We are going to freeze the minimum charge this year. Again, this applies to homeowners who in 1 to 3 family homes who use less than about 100 gallons a day. This is a very minimum water use. Again, it's very typically older people whose families have moved out and they're using very little water. We charge them a minimum rate. That's about the same as the cost of the infrastructure. It's sort of a charge to the cost of providing service to the house. And so we are going to freeze that for the first time. Before, it's always gone up with the rate. But again, in an effort, because we know these are very tough economic times in the city, we are going to freeze that for the coming year. I mentioned before the service line protection program. I think this is a terrific benefit for people. It's not free, but it is certainly very good value, and we already have 141,000 customers who've signed up for it, and it's more signing up every day. Word of mouth is getting out that it's a very good thing to do for for $4.49 a month and $8.47 a month. You can get insurance on both your water and your sewer line. The contract is done, this was done competitively, and the contract allows periodically for those rates to be increased, and this year the sewer rate can be increased based on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Plumbing Producer Price Index. So overall, between the two, it will be about a 3.8% increase on that rate. There's several other things we're doing to try to assist customers. One is extending the deadline for filing an appeal with the water board. It was 30 days. People say that sometimes it takes them more time to get the documentation together they want to send to us, so we're extending it to 60 days. We are also halting the lien sale process for customers who have filed an appeal, so that some people say, I filed an appeal, but you put me on the list, and now I feel compelled to settle my appeal because I don't want you to sell a lien. So we are going to not list people for lien sales if they have a pending appeal. And similarly, for people who have, when they come on to AMR, a big catch-up bill, we will, after the installation of AMR, they'll be able to request 90 days of interest-free to play the catch-up on the bill. There's no question the water's been used, but it gives people a little breathing space if they do have a larger than anticipated bill. We also have something called a multifamily conservation program. This is geared over for family apartment buildings, and those properties have been automatically enrolled. They can go on, they have to get a meter installed, but they can continue to have a flat rate charge as long as they have a meter installed. And then we also want them to have high efficiency fixtures installed as part of that program. But we are, because some people have been having trouble getting that work done, we are extending the deadline so that they can get everything will be done at the same deadline. It'll have to be done by June 30th, 2016. And we are reinstating the toilet replacement program. This was a very successful program in the 90s, I think it was, and we are reinstating it now for buildings on the multifamily conservation program to help them install low flow toilets. Again, this is part of getting to that point in 2021 when we have to shut down the Delaware Aqueduct, and we know that these things take time to do, so we're working to get the consumption of water down as part of that program, so we'll be able to make it through that shutdown. Okay, so wrapping up again, thank you for your patience. The increase is 3.35%, and I will turn it back to the chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lloyd. We're now going to open up the floor to comments from the public, and I'll call everyone up in the order I have them listed on the sheet. Just so to make the process a little more smoother, we have a handy shot clock right here in front that gives every speaker 5 minutes, and I'll start it as soon as we get going. We only, I think I only have one person who signed up right now to speak. After they're finished, I'll call in the audience again if there's anyone who wants to give additional comments. So let's get going. The first speaker we have tonight is Ms. Hardy.
Just do it here, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, everyone. My first time in one of these meetings. I did not come prepared. You answered my question. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Emily Lloyd.
Emily Lloyd? Lloyd. You did answer my question regarding conserving water. Homeowner who conserves water. This is actually goes against what the objective is, because we're trying to raise revenue for the big projects and so forth. And so it almost seems as though one is penalized. So that's a single family homeowner such as myself. I just took over my ailing parents' home. It's a single family, and the water bill was quite high when I moved there. I got it down, I fixed leaks and everything, and now the bill is now going to keep going up. So, and it's also more expensive to install these water conserving things like toilets and things. Of course, there's vouchers, but it just doesn't seem fair. My other issue is in the Bedford-Stuyvesant Bushwick area that I live. I'm sure everyone is well aware of this, or maybe you're not, I don't know where you guys live, open hydrants during the summertime. It's very frustrating. How much does this really affect the water bill, or who pays for these open hydrants when you call and complain? You know, I'm told that the fire department is supposed to be going around, and as soon as maybe the fire department comes around, someone could just open the hydrant again. These are often people who don't pay for water. The other issue I have is we have a family business. It's an exterminating business, and it afforded me opportunities to enter people's homes at different times over the past many years that I've lived in Brooklyn. And I've noticed that many houses don't even have water meters in them, like mine does. Single-family homes, Bedford Stuyvesant. How does that work? I haven't been in people's basements. The other thing is, I just recently signed up for DriveWise with my car insurance. I have a car, it sits on the street, I take the train, I get a discounted rate over time for not using my car. Why can't we get a discounted rate more so when we don't use water? Why does it still go up? Is there any sort of initiative or incentive, or does it seem fair? Lastly, when did we actually start paying for water in Brooklyn or in the city? I don't recall. I mean, I was a kid, so my grandfather used to have his hose out, and, water the sidewalk, and water was, I mean, I understand, but I just don't, I guess we were paying sewer rates all this time, but it just seems with the water rate itself, how much did we really pay for in the 70s? I don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of questions I guess I just raised. Thank you very much.
That's okay, then we can get to some of them for you, absolutely. Commissioner, you want to take a couple of these? Or?
Well, yeah, I don't think I can answer all of them, but I think, yes, it is a conundrum that the less, as people use less, the rate has to compensate for that lower use. We have looked, and in fact, in other parts of the country, there are lawsuits going on right now, and it depends on how your enabling legislation is written in creating the water system. Some cities are allowed to have a rate that the more water you use, when you get above a certain amount, you're charged significantly more. It encourages conservation, and people below that rate essentially get a discount. And that's something that we think is very attractive, but we haven't figured out legally how to do it yet. And I think we will be coming back around and looking at that again as part of trying to get the consumption down. Because if people want to use all the water that they want to use and water lawns and things, I think it would be perfectly reasonable. If you can get your water down to 100 gallons a day, you'll get, and I don't know with the number of people living in your house, if you can do that, you would qualify for the minimum rate, which is only about a third of a typical home is charged. So that would be a help as well. Do you know when we started charging? It was always frontage before. I'll let Steve answer your question about charging.
So I'll answer it this way. We started metering homes in Brooklyn in the 1990s. My house was metered in the early 90s. Before that, you were paying for the water, but your house, like every other house in Brooklyn, was charged a flat annual rate based on, we called it the frontage rate because it's based on the frontage of your building, the width, the number of apartments in the building, the number of water consuming fixtures in the building, then we came under a mandate to meter every building, and that's when you started getting billed separately for your water in a quarterly bill instead of you probably and many homeowners weren't aware. I wasn't aware of it because before I was metered, my water was charged through my mortgage escrow along with my property taxes. But you were paying for water back then. It just wasn't as obvious.
And it didn't go up and down because it was frontage.
Right. It was a fixed annual charge. So you know, if you use a lot of water, you got a bargain. If you didn't use so much water, you may have been paying more than you needed to. You mentioned that in your business you've seen a number of single-family homes without meters. Every home is required to be metered, and as part of the universal metering program, if homes did not get metered by a certain date, and I don't remember what that is, they were subject to a surcharge. So they were continuing to pay the frontage rate, but paying 2 times the frontage rate. That was their penalty, basically for not allowing us in to meter their homes. And as many times as we've notified people and sent water inspectors and so on, there still are a number of homeowners who refuse to be metered, and so they pay a rate that's twice as high as they otherwise would. And I think that's it. Oh, I'm sorry, the hydrants. Yes. Sure.
This is
Sure.
the hydrants, nobody pays for that water, but a hydrant, it is drinking water that comes from the hydrants, and the reason the two are connected is because it's a system that runs throughout the city under every street, and it's under pressure, which is needed for hydrants. The capping program is, in some neighborhoods, extremely effective. In other neighborhoods, it depends on the age of the kids. If the little kids are little, the spray seems to be okay. The older kids, but
These are adults.
that's what I mean. Older people don't like the spray caps. They like the big spray. Every year we go out and try to do more with it, and I think that over the next 3 or 4 years we're going to really be looking at it as part of a heat treatment program, because one of the predictions about climate change is extremely hot summers, and so I think we may be forced to put some more resources around getting them capped and having more people, having more of them open and capped so the spray can be used by more people. And you can't do that if they're not capped because the water pressure starts to drop. That's really the major negative. If you have several of them going in the same area, the water pressure will drop, and then if there's a fire, it's a problem. So we go around and try to get them shut off. We to some degree rely on people to call 311 and tell us that they're open. And even then, we only get to the ones that are the most egregious most of the time.
How is it that no one pays for that water? How is it? I don't understand that part.
Well, it's not metered, and right now, because there's plenty of water, we are in a wet slice of climate change, so there's plenty of water in the reservoirs, and there's not a tremendous added cost to letting it come down here by gravity and flow through the water mains. So there's very little real cost to it, to anyone using it. Where the significant cost is having it go into the wastewater treatment system, where it has to be treated and used, and energy has to be used. So that's where the cost is. When people use it, a lot of it evaporates before it ever gets into the catch basin and goes into the sewer. So it's probably even pretty minimal on that basis.
Can I just ask one more question that I forgot to ask when I was at?
Sure, just let's bring the mic over.
Since no one else is asking. Could you explain on this, it's the single family versus the multi-family dwelling unit? The single family has 991, and the multi-dwelling unit is 644. I don't understand those figures.
Sure.
And how would a multi-family be charged less than a single family?
Steve is big.
Right. So, on average, in New York City, a single-family home uses about 80,000 gallons a year, and a multi-family home, if you think of a large apartment building that you have the water that's used inside the apartment for cooking and bathing and so on. What you don't have in an apartment building in each of those dwelling units is watering a lawn. The additional water usage that tends to come with having a single-family home, a standalone home, and some kind of yard. So on average, the multifamily apartments consume a lot less water, about 52,000 gallons a year, as opposed to 80,000 gallons for a single family.
Really?
Yes.
That's a charge per unit, not for the whole building. It's a
Right. So
For a farm.
right. So a four-family.
What about Bed-Stuy where there's no yard and it's just simple?
Well, again, it's an average. Some neighborhoods, if you think of neighborhoods in eastern Queens or Staten Island with large lawns, some, in your area, for example, there might be, a 20 by 40 foot backyard that you water occasionally.
Yeah.
Those are estimates based on
I would
meter
figure-
consumption.
Yes.
So it's metered.
I would figure in the multifamily, a lot of the usage is multiple people, especially where there's a lot of people living in one place. You don't know how many people are in there bathing and using water and flushing toilets and things and,
Sure, I'm just saying, it's an average.
They're still billed based on the amount of gallons that they use. So they're billed based on what they actually consume.
Right, it's just gives you an average. Okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak that haven't signed up? Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned earlier this evening, any written remarks can be submitted to the New York City Water Board, care of Kevin Kunkel, at 59-17 Junction Boulevard in Flushing, New York. Zip code is 11373. We have no further business. This hearing is adjourned. Good night.